Hello. Today we're going to learn and review everything we've done in Unit 5, so we can be ready for our Unit 5 test next week. All right, so the first thing we learned were some vocab words dealing with X values and Y values. I always remember these as Dixie and Royd. Here's Dixie over here. This is Dixie, and each letter of her name stands for something. So D stands for domain, I stands for input, X is your X value, and then the other I is your independent variable. All of these words have to deal with X. So whenever you hear these words, you're thinking of your X values. This is Royd over here, and Royd, each letter of his name means something. We have R, which stands for range, O, which stands for output, Y, which is your Y value, and D for your dependent variable. All of these words represent the Y value. So if you hear any of these three words, you're going to think Y or Y value. So Dixie Royd will help you remember the vocab words relating to the X values and the Y values. So speaking of those vocab words, this says find the domain and range of the relation. So they gave us this relation to set of ordered pairs, and they want us to find the domain and the range. Well, the domain is just a list of all possible X values, and we list them from least to greatest. So since this is in ordered pairs, I know ordered pairs, my X values are first and my Y values are second. So I have to make a list of all of my X values from least to greatest. So we usually put them in like these squiggly brackets. Sometimes you'll see like an X inside, like that. Sometimes you won't, sometimes it'll just be numbers. Either way, but we know we're looking for our X values. So I'm gonna look at my X values. I see I have 3, 4, 5, and 3. So what's my smallest X value? Well, I see it's 3. Even though 3 shows up twice up here, I still only have to write it once. Because 3, they're just asking for a possible input, and 3 is a possible input. All right, what's my next smallest? Well, I see that is 4. And then my next smallest, or my last one, is 5. So the domain of that relation is 3, 4, 5. If I'm looking for range, range is a list of all my Y values. So once again, you'll see it in squiggly brackets. Sometimes you'll see a Y in there. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes it'll just be numbers. But I know the Y is my second number listed. So my Y's are 2, 3, 7, and 1. And I'm going to put those from least to greatest. So 1 is my smallest. I see that 2 is my next smallest. I see 3 is my next smallest. And then I'm only left with 7, that's my last one. So the range of this relation is 1, 2, 3, 7. So domain is a list of all your X values from least to greatest, and the range is a list of all your possible Y values from least to greatest. The next thing we learned was function or not a function. So here's some examples of tables, ordered pairs, and mappings, and which ones are functions and which ones are not functions. So the table, this is a function because all of our X values are different. Whenever all your X values are different, it's going to be a function. The one on the right is not a function because this 1 repeats as an X value. That 1 cannot be at 12 and 2 at the same time. So therefore, that is not a function. Ordered pairs, we do the same thing. We're going to look at our X values. I have 1, 0, 3. All those are different, so I know that is a function. The one on the right here, I have 1, 0, and 1. This 1 repeats as an X value, so I know that that is not a function. On mapping, the X values are always on the left, and the Y values are always on the right. We want all of our X's to only have one arrow coming from it. So 1 only has one arrow, 3 only has one arrow, 5 only has one arrow. So this is a function. The one on the right here, I see this 1 has 2 arrows coming from it. It's got an arrow going to 2, and it also has an arrow going to 12. This is not a function. The way I always thought about it is, think Mr. 1, he cannot go to Mr. 2's house and Mr. 12's house at the same time, right? It's not possible. It doesn't work. It's not a function. Sometimes you'll have graphs, and they'll say, is this a function or not? And we can do graphs pretty easily. It's called the vertical line test. And what you do is you just draw a straight up and down line, a vertical line, and what you want is only one point that is graphed on each vertical line. So I drew a line, there's only one point on each of the lines I drew, so I know that's a function. This one here I know is not a function because if I draw a vertical line here, I see 2 points are on that same vertical line. That means my x values repeat, and I know that it's not a function. When it's a continuous line, it's the same thing. I just draw a vertical line, and I see how many times it hits. So this one's a function because no matter where I draw it, it only hits my vertical line one time. The one on the right here, if I draw a straight vertical line, I see that it hits twice. That means my x values repeat on those points. So therefore, it's not a function. Is this a function? Yes or no? Answer on the Ed puzzle. All right, this is not a function because if I do a vertical line, I see I have 2 points that hit my vertical line. Not a function. Is this a function? Answer on the Ed puzzle. This is a function because where I draw my vertical lines, there's only 1 point on each vertical line. So this is a function. All right, next thing we learned was slope and slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form is used in math all the time. You'll use it next year in algebra. You'll use it in geometry. You'll use it in algebra 2. All right, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. All right, slope is known as m in the equation, and that stands for rise over run. That's when we graph. It's always written as a fraction, right? The top number tells you how many up or down. The bottom number tells you how many over. B is our y-intercept, and we want to think B as where it begins. That's where we want to begin graphing our line. And the y-intercept is wherever it crosses the y-axis. So on this graph here, this yellow line, wherever it crosses the y-axis is my y-intercept. And I see it crosses right here at -2. So -2 for this line would be the y-intercept. On this purple graph over here, I see this pink line. This pink line crosses the y-axis, the up and down axis, at 3. So my y-intercept for that graph would be 3. All right, so how do I graph an equation? Well, I know that to graph an equation, it has to be in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And I know m is my slope and b is my y-intercept. So to be able to graph it, I have to first find my slope and my y-intercept. What I usually start with is my y-intercept because that's where we're beginning. That's what that b stands for, is begin. And that's always the number being added or subtracted at the end. So my b in this equation is right here. It says +2, +2. So I can graph that on my coordinate plane, and I do that by putting a dot on 2 on the y-axis, because it told me it was a +2. So now I have to find my slope, and my slope is the number with the x, the number attached to the x. So my slope here is 3. But remember, slope is always rise over run. So we want to try and change that to a fraction. So that will help us. So what is 3 as a fraction? Well, any whole number is really over 1, because 3 divided by 1 will give us 3. So our fraction would be 3 over 1. So when we graph this, we start with our y-intercept, which was 2, and then from that point, we're going to use our slope to find our next point. So my rise is 3, so I'm going to go up 3. 1, 2, 3, and my run is 1. So then I go over 1, and that is my next point. And I can do the same thing from that point. I can go up 1, 2, 3, and then over 1. And then once I get a couple points on my line, on my coordinate plane, I can draw a line. This is a linear equation. So whenever you plot your points, you want to make sure it makes a line, a straight line. If it doesn't make a straight line, you might have made a mistake. So you always want to make sure it's a straight line. All right, on this one, they gave me a graph, and I have to make the equation. All right, so to do that, I have to find out what's my m, which is my slope, and what's my b, which is my y-intercept. I usually start with my y-intercept first because that's the easiest to find, and that's just wherever it crosses the y-axis. The y-axis, remember, is this up and down one, and I see it crosses right here at -2. So I know my b is -2. So now I have to find my slope. So I need to find a good point. This looks like a pretty good point. It goes right through that grid. I got to figure out my rise over my run. So how many up do I need to go on top of how many over I need to go to get to that point? So let's see, I have to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. I had to go up 4 points, 4 lines. So I know that's going to be on the top of my fraction. The bottom of my fraction is how many over, and I have to go over 1, 2, 3. So my slope is 4 over 3. So now I have to write this as an equation. Well, it's always y equals, so it'd be y equals 4 over 3. And in slope-intercept form, the slope's always attached to the x. So I'm going to make sure I write an x. And then my y-intercept is -2. So when it's negative, I just write minus. So my equation would be y equals 4 over 3x minus 2. All right, that was a good review of most things we did in Unit 5. If you got those down, you'll do awesome on the test. Have a great day.